Okay. Okay, family. What I'm doing now is we had a few technical difficulties, and I'm waiting to have the brother Quasi come on from DTR 360 books, and I'm going to move over just to see what we can do. And I really want to see how this works. Never had a problem like this before, but I'm coming on with brother who handles a lot of different books, and I'm just waiting to see him come on. Hopefully he'll. Okay, here we go. Okay, let's see if this works now. This technology is something else.
Oh man.
Okay,
Yes,
how's
yes,
that,
sir.
brother?
We are live, brother. We
That is
are
good.
live in full effect. Oh man. I don't
We're
know
live.
what
Okay.
happened. I don't know what
Okay,
happened,
well
but
that's all right because we're here now. That's all that matters. So I'm gonna give the show to you, brother man.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, cool. Let me tap into my other phone to get the audio. All right. And I'm gonna do the intro and then we'll get started. Welcome to DTR 360 Books Podcast. DTR 360 Books. We're helping to increase reading literacy. We are here to create more doers and less talkers. This is where we execute the knowledge and put it into action. Enjoy this week's episode of the podcast. Assalamu alaikum, shalom, shalom, hotep, Islam, alafia, peace. What's going on, family? Brother Quasi of DTR 360 Books. Happy Monday. This is episode three of DTR 360 Books. Man, we have the pleasure, we have the honor of sitting down and hearing so much knowledge, information from this great elder, from this great brother, from this great professor. He has done it all right? And I'm speaking of none other than Professor Kaba Kamene. Brother, I just hope I got your name correct. I hope I got your name correct. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you, brother. Brother Kaba is
How,
fine. It's all
Brother
good.
Kaba, how are you, Brother Kaba?
I am doing excellent, but more excellent now, brother. I'm learning this technology as we go along, and things happen, but I grow. I grow with this technology, and I see the value of what we
Yes, sir.
can do together, brother. So I thank you for inviting me on to your platform to talk to those that follow and respect your work, and I thank all those on my side who have joined in also. So together we're gonna make this happen.
Indeed. Yes, sir. Apologies again for the technical difficulties, but as you said, we are here. So let's get the show started. All right. And so thank you as well. Thank you for accepting my invitation to have this podcast with you. All right. So Brother Kaba, I want to know, what was it like growing up? If you can explain your upbringing to the family.
Well, I grew up in Midtown Manhattan, 63rd Street. There's a housing complex, Amsterdam Projects, and that's where I was born and raised the first 15 years of my life. And because of where we were located, 63rd Street, Amsterdam Avenue, 10th Avenue, when you travel north, that's Harlem. When you travel south, that's Hell's Kitchen. So we always used to say that the Harlem was our front yard and Hell's Kitchen was our backyard. And so I grew up, and I know a lot of folk will talk about the trying times that they had.
Mm-hmm.
And we had our trying times. But we also had some solid, good people that we all grew up in all of our housing complexes, no matter what the challenges may be, which we do have. But we also have good people that work hard, take care of families, trying to make sure that everything is all right. They protected us. They protected the community. And that's the greatest memories that I have. I also have the other memories of the trials, the tribulations, when drugs first entered into our community. I have those memories also. But the real key is the regard and the respect that I have for us as a people and what we attempted to do. Went to Catholic school, Roman Catholic school, went to church, all that, sang in the choir, altar boy. But my name at the time was Booker Taliaferro Coleman Jr., named after my father. My father's from Alabama. He was named after Booker T. Washington.
Wow.
So there was always culture in my family. And so I grew up in a sense of culture. And then, of course, 2 years after I was born was when our brother, now ancestor, Emmett Till, was murdered.
1955.
And so I was born into the civil rights movement. It was just right there. I remember as a young man, my parents got real scared about, watching out over me, as most parents did after that happened to Emmett Till. And so, we grew up in a consciousness constantly. I mean, the Vietnam War and Dr. King were the two things on our TV all the time. We were watching the Vietnam War and we watched the civil rights and the human rights movement. And so that's where I came out of. But in terms of that is my African American upbringing, my consciousness as an African American. But I had family, I had friends whose family practiced what is called Santeria, which is the syncretic development of an African faith system that Roman Catholicism is superimposed over. And I remember as a young man visiting my friend, and there being celebrations, there being rituals in Santeria. I saw las siete potencias, the seven powers. I was exposed to Espiritismo, which is deeply rooted in an original Caribbean, African concept. So what I tell folk all the time is that I was not introduced to Africa through history. That would happen later with Dr. John Henrik Clarke. I was introduced to Africa not only in the Spanish language, but I was introduced to Africa through spirituality. And that's very interesting to be introduced to Africa that way, because it was the drumming, it was the food, it was the rituals. I was all up in it, Brother Kwesi.
Wow.
Family, I just felt that African rhythm in the drums and the festivities. So all this other stuff that I hear out here about negativity, about Santeria and devil worship, I know that's not true. And I know that because as a child, maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age, I was in the middle of this ritual where there was nothing but love being produced. And of course, now in the French language, Santeria is in the Spanish language. In the French language, it's voodoo. In the Portuguese language of Brazil, it's candomblé. In the English-speaking Caribbean, it's called obia. And whether pastor want to admit it or not, the African tradition of the Orishas, of the Yoruba people of Nigeria, is deeply steeped in the African-American Black Baptist Church. So they may try to avoid it and not look at this, but they're deeply steeped in the African tradition, the call and response. Well, folk be talking to you. Well, pastor be dancing, talking, the drums sometimes be going, but not just that. While it's the male that's at the lectern, women run the black church. Church sisters run the black church. And that's how it was in Africa. Because although many people will tell you and show you that the Neset Biti, or the Pharaoh, ruled Kush Kemet, it was the women that identified the one that was to rule.
Yes.
It's called, it was called the laying on of the hands. And these are the types of things that as an African people, we have to return back to, to understand. And see, this is what I was exposed to from an African perspective at a very young age. Now, I didn't understand everything because as an African American, Spanish became my second language. And at one point in my life,
you speak Spanish?
Well, I don't speak it like I used to, but when I was younger, I was far more fluent than I am now. Now that I've studied other languages and I haven't used it, I am not necessarily interacting with people who speak Spanish fluently, particularly since I retired from the Board of Ed. But Spanish was my second language, and I spoke it understandably. I mean, I wasn't directly, now my sister was fluent. In fact, my sister and I were thrown out of a party because the people thought that we were not proud to be Puerto Rican. Because when they heard my sister speak Spanish and they heard me speak the way I spoke, they thought that we were Puerto Rican. And so these are the types of memories I have growing up, Brother Kwesi. And particularly my reverence for Africa came through spirituality, not through history. I didn't sit in classes and learn about Africa in the beginning. I was in rituals, dancing. They even let me play the drums sometime.
Beautiful.
And so that's my exposure to Africa. And this is why I say to people, I am an African American. I have worked for my community, Americans in Africa, my entire life. But my proverb is what Dr. Clark taught us, it's Pan-African or perish.
Right.
It make me no difference if you an African, you are my family. You from Ghana, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Haiti, you from Holland, speak Dutch. Suriname, speak Dutch. If you're African, you're my family. And I can be a proud African American working for the advancement of African American people and at the same time support and embrace and love my brothers and sisters in the diaspora.
Of course. Beautiful, beautiful. Brother, I did not know that you was introduced to Africa through Santeria and through Spanish-speaking culture and so forth. So I've actually learned something new about you here tonight, which is wonderful. Brother Kaba, so you mentioned you've now retired with the New York City Board of Education. According to my research, you've been a teacher, or you worked within the Board of Ed for over 30 years. Is that correct?
I first started teaching in Gary, Indiana, 1977. Okay. I started teaching in New York in 1979. I retired from the Board of Education in 2009, but I was also teaching college. I was part of the Black Studies Department at the State University at New Paltz, upstate New York.
Yes, sir.
I was there for 12 years. And I retired from there in 2016. And then I started my book writing, and I started going more out, doing presentations. So basically, I would say I started in 1977, and I use the word graduate. I didn't retire from the Board of Ed. I graduated from the Board of Ed. Because now I'm doing what I was born to do, which is to be with brothers like you, Kwesi, and your audience and my family. Now I'm doing what I was born to do. Everything I was doing, I always say my classroom was my classroom. Because what I am doing now, I just finished a webinar. We do a webinar every Tuesday. The webinar will come out tomorrow. It's in my link tree. And also I do a webinar the first Sunday of every month. So we did a webinar yesterday, Sunday. And so this has been a very busy week. Just before I came on with you, I did webinar number 15 or 16 on Tep Heseb, the scientific method. Yesterday, I did a presentation on DNA. Because family, we have to understand this. We have to understand we were the original scientists. We were the one that laid out in my next webinar next week. I'm going to show you through the work of Dr. Theophilio Benga. I'm going to show you where the scientific method, 6 steps to the scientific method in science. I taught this to children. And I'm not talking from a cultural perspective. I'm talking about in science. The 6 steps of scientific method. You ask a question. You gather information. You develop an experiment and perform it as it relates to the question that you asked. You then present a hypothesis. You gather your information from the experiment. And then you draw your conclusion. That's what we use in science today. That's what we teach in science today. But what we don't know, it came to us via the Greeks, but the Greeks got it from the Kush Kemet scientists. And I'm going to show you it next week. I'm going to show you the Medunetta, and I'm going to show you the Greek script where the scientific method came from that we teach today. The question, the gathering of information. My bad. The hypothesis is the 3rd step. Experiment is the 4th step. Gather your, analyze your information, and then the final one is you draw your conclusion. I do that for everything I do. When I teach about the origins of life in Africa, I use the scientific method. When I talk about the origins of the human family in Africa, I use the scientific method. It's something that we do. We invented it. We developed it, and we shared it with the world. They then obliterated our name.
Yes, sir.
They then took our name off it, put their name on it, and now we don't realize that what they're teaching, we taught them, but they never got it because they teach it real bad. I'm telling you that now. It's rough.
Oh, yes.
Having been in the system for the time I've been, Brad Kwesi, now we got to turn this around for our family. Got to make it interesting for our children.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And speaking of our children, Professor, I know that you've taught kindergarten for some years, and so yeah, I would like to know that your experience while teaching kindergarten, and I feel like I have an affinity with you, Professor, because I too teach 1st grade. I've taught kindergarten. I am a teacher. I teach a charter school here out in Newark, New Jersey. So I feel like I have an affinity with you of you yourself teaching kindergarten and teaching elementary, teaching higher ups with higher education in college and so forth. But I'll go back to your early years in teaching kindergarten. What was that like? And why kindergarten? Why did you start out as a kindergarten teacher? And what was that whole experience like, Professor?
Brother Kwesi, let me take you back to when I was in Gary, Indiana, because you'll understand what I'm going to tell you about New York better if I tell you what happened. My background in college was international politics. That was my major, was international politics. My minor was Caribbean studies with a focus on revolution. Because at that time, when I was in college in the early 70s, Chile and Guatemala and El Salvador and places were going through a lot of different changes. And so I wanted to study revolution. I wanted to understand Che Guevara. I wanted to understand Fidel Castro. I wanted to understand it from a perspective that was objective. I never had an education course in my life. So I am working as an intern, WWRL radio station, because I was into communications. I was into radio and television, studying it. And I received a request after I graduated that they needed a production manager and a weekend disc jockey in a newly acquired black-owned radio station in Gary, Indiana. So I went out. I took the job. My production job was in the evening. My weekend disc jockey job was on Saturday and Sunday. It was pretty good. However, I was approached by people in the school system, the high school, and they said that the radio and television teacher went on sabbatical, which means he took a leave for a year, and they needed somebody to teach radio and television to the students at Roosevelt High School, all black high school. This is a school that the Jacksons went to.
Okay.
And so because teaching from like 8 to 3 didn't interfere with my job, I said, well, I'll get to, I get to meet young people. I get to hear their music and how it flow in Gary, and I can bring some things from New York, to Gary. So yeah, okay. So I took the job. But I was so impacted by my students. I had so many experiences with these high school students. Some of them was close to my age.
Wow.
I had so many experiences with these students. They changed my life. I thought I was going to Gary to teach them about radio and television, and Gary taught me about teaching.
Indeed.
And I found my life's destiny in Gary, Indiana.
Powerful.
Because I had such a great relationship with, because see, for me, brother, it was just, I'm a brother in my early 20s in radio and television, about to break out, thinking I'm the next Frankie Crocker, the chief rocker. I'm going to do all this in radio. And the students were so receptive. Example, first day of school, it's lunchtime. And of course, I come up and I'm online. And the teachers that are in the front beckon me to come forward because, they say, you're a teacher. You don't have to get online like the students. You just go right to the front of the line. And I noticed that the students, like skipping me in line, they weren't too happy with that. So they decided, so I saw their discontent in their face. And the next day I got online and the teachers again are beckoning me to come to the front. And like I make believe I'm talking to somebody and I give them, like I'll be there in a moment and I start talking to a student. Okay, eventually I get to the front where I'm going to get my lunch with the students. And student asked me, where am I going to eat? See, the first day I ate in the faculty lounge.
Okay.
Here's the second day, they said, where am I going to eat? I said, where are you going to eat? He said, we're going to eat over there. I said, can I join you? And so I sat with the students. Because in my head, I couldn't understand. This is a phenomenal time to create a relationship with your students. Why are you separating yourself in the faculty lounge?
True.
This is the time to sit up in the lunchroom and talk to the students, get them to know you from a different perspective, and you get to know them from a different perspective.
Yes, sir.
So, eventually, Brother Kwesi, I asked a question about Malcolm X. And many of them heard of him, didn't know him. Some of them, I started asking them questions about Africa, they didn't necessarily know. So I during lunch, I used to actually give classes on Africa. And pretty soon the other students, they had the kind of tables. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, Kwesi. The kind that you fold up like this,
Yes, we
and they
still have
stand
them.
up, and then you open them up, and the
Yes, we
benches
still
are
have
there.
them.
Okay, well
Yes.
that's the way it was. Within a month of my being there, by the beginning of October, students were positioning those tables around so they could listen to me teach about Africa and the African American experience. That was my
Wow.
first understanding. Our children want to know this.
Oh, yes.
They are hungry. They are like a dry sponge waiting to be absorbed in the waters of wisdom and knowledge. And so students came to me and they said, can you, we need a junior. At the time, they had junior proms. They may still have them. But it's not just a senior prom, but it's a junior prom. And you have to collect money and you have to do different types of fundraising in order to have the prom. So the students come to me in the junior class and ask me, would I be willing to be a faculty representative for the junior prom? And so I say, sure. And in my mind, I'm saying all these teachers that these students have known all this time, none of them will do this. And I just didn't understand. I wasn't coming as a teacher. I was coming as a human being. The student asked you to help them. Why don't you help them? And so I said, sure. So what I did, keep in mind, Soul Train, Don Cornelius, had just begun to go syndicated. But the original Soul Train was in Chicago. So Chicago still aired the local Soul Train. And then Don Cornelius had the syndicated one that went around the country. So for the junior class, what I did is I took my television class and I took my radio class and I created a club, a media club. And in this media club, what I would have them do is that the television class would film and the radio class would spin the records while we invited students to come in and dance in the studio. And then I would take the video and we'd play it at lunch and we'd ask people for a nickel. Now, that did a couple of things. First of all, the discipline in the lunchroom changed because nobody was messing around because they wanted to see this. The other thing was we raised money for the junior class. The third thing was the students really did learn television and radio because they actually were doing it. It wasn't like a class you sat in. I believed in hands-on. If you're going to take radio, you got to know the turntables, you know how to sync your records and things like that. If you're going to be in television, you got to work the camera. I'm not going to just say you can't handle a camera. So then students come to me and they say, because in Gary, Indiana at this time, brother, they had no movie house.
Wow.
They had no place for anybody to go. When the Ebony Fashion Fair came to Gary, they actually had the fashion show in Roosevelt High School. There was no banquet halls. There was nothing in Gary, Indiana. It's different now because I've been back. But back in '77, they did not have anything. But on the outskirts of the suburbs, there was a roller skating rink. And the students said, can we start a roller skating club? And I said, sure. But again, Brother Kwesi, all the elder teachers never worked with the students. And I'm not saying never and all the teachers. We have good people there. But the life of the school, they're coming to me. I've been in the school for a month. And now all of a sudden, things happen. So when we started the roller skating rink, I got money. So that not only did we go to roller skating rink, but if they wanted to get something to eat, chips, something to drink, we had money where everybody could get something. And we had a great time. There was a brother in my class Second period. He was in class every day. He was never late. Always did his homework. He came to me with a letter requesting to be absent from school the next day, because he had to go to court, and he had they accused him of doing something. And I don't necessarily want to say what it is, but it was something that shocked me. Because I said, brother, you are my best student.
Right.
You're never late. You're always dressed. You always do your homework. You always have intelligent questions. How could this be? You know, how could you, on one end, be a model human being and student and get caught up in something like this? And he said, things happen. And I said, but why do you come to my class this way and be the great person that you are? I said, do your other teachers feel? He said, Mr. Coleman, your class is the only class I come to. Wow. I come in second period and I leave just before third. And I said, brother, let me ask you, why? He said, because I honestly feel like you respect me and I feel safe in your class. That made me a teacher. That's when I left. When I left, the program director in the radio station told me I had to write a letter of resignation because nobody would believe I was making 5 times the amount of money in radio than I was making as a teacher. Are you out of your mind? He said, you're going to have to write that because I can't accept that. Because people won't believe that you did this. They'll think that I did something to get you out. So you got to write a letter of resignation to protect me.
Right.
And so I did. And I came back to New York via Washington, D.C. I spent some time in D.C. Came back to New York. And the one thing that I realized in my high school experience was I wanted to get them young. Remember, I don't have an education course. I've never had an education course. So I had to take the extra courses. You know, the 6 credits in reading and the 6 credits in education. You had to have 12 credits in education. And so I took the classes during the summertime, and I was hired in October of 1979. And my license is in early childhood. Because I realized I wanted to get our children young.
Yes.
Because of my experience in high school. I realized in talking to my students in high school, in Roosevelt High School, that there had been a lot of untruths printed on the chalkboards of their mind. And I wanted to get children before that nonsense was on their mind. And I wanted to be the writing on their mind that would negate the lies that they're told as they get older. But here's the answer to your question.
Yes, sir.
My experience with young people, as I know you know, I give my 4- and 5-year-olds credit for making me the teacher that I have become. Because, Brother Kwesi, you got to break stuff down to their lowest common denominator. Whatever subject you teaching, because normally in the early grades, we teach all the major classes.
Yes.
They may go to gym and arts and crafts, and somebody will come in to give you an administrative break. But basically in the early grades, you teach every subject: math, science, language arts, social studies. And so that's how I see this. When I have to break things down, you can't assume that a 5-year-old knows what you know. You have to start from scratch and build on that scratch to teaching 1 + 1 = 2. You have to teach them various factors before you can teach them how to write the letter A, the sound of the letter T.
Yes.
See, when you're in middle school and high school, you walk in assuming that they know that.
Oh,
And I used to
they
always tell
should.
my professors when I taught in college, I used to say, if I had my way, the teacher that would be paid the most money would be the teacher that is teaching the earliest grades. In other words, kindergarten teachers would be making the most money. Pre-kindergarten, early childhood teachers, their salary would be the best, because what they have to do to teach is very different from a college professor that walks into a room talking, expecting the students to have the notebook out, the pen in your hand. Don't make me have to tell you, take your notebook out.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make me have to tell you, write that down, it's important. In the early grades, you got to guide the child. Okay, everybody, take out your notebook. You
Sometimes you
got your
gotta say
pencil?
it 2-3 times.
Say that again, brother.
I said sometimes you gotta repeat yourself 2 and 3 times because
Oh, yeah.
they be so
Yes,
off course and not focused.
yes. And sometimes children are in other areas, man. They're in the other areas of cyberspace sometimes, man, where
Yes.
their mind isn't. And you can't assume because you're on target, they're on target. You almost have to live through them to understand how to teach them.
Mm.
And that is my greatest advantage. What allows me to teach to the community, and one thing that many folk tell me, is that I make things simple. I can break down complex issues and make them very simple. And the concept is, the reason why I can do that is because of the years that I spent with 5-year-olds, not to mention my own biological children.
Right. Right.
But 5-year-olds, I spent my life there. I think like a child. Some thoughts come in my head even now. Is a child's thought. That's the way a child would think about something. And so my early child, and now I've taught every grade, because from there I went to middle school, I've taught high school, and of course college. But it's them early childhood years, brother, that shaped my ability to take complex issues and make them simple.
That's peace. Now, Brother Kaba, I want to read a passage from this book, if I may. The first time I heard about this book is through you, through one of your speeches, of course. And it's titled Self-Taught African American Education in Slavery and Freedom by Heather Andrea Williams. Powerful, powerful book. I have it right here. I love this book. I have notes all over this book. I'm going to read a passage on page 173. It says, after attending examinations of students in schools in Hampton, Virginia, General Samuel C. Armstrong declared that he could bear witness to a steady growth in knowledge and interest. The more advanced pupils seem to have a healthy ambition. It is clear, he said, that freed children do not get tired of going to school. The more they know, the more they wish to know. The superintendent of education for North Carolina joined in the assessment that the freed people's interest in education was constantly deepening and widening. Professor Kaba, what does that say to you?
It says what I have seen all the while. I'm sorry, say that last part again.
No, I was going to say, yeah. How do you reflect on that statement, brother?
That is why Jim Crow came into existence. That is fundamentally why they made a law that said that African people could not read, could not learn how to read, because they understood that it is natural for a person of African descent to want to know. Now, not only African descent, all human beings. But for us as a people, we were the first teachers and we were the first students. They denied us our natural environment of learning. And then what we're experiencing now is that they have denigrated it. This is what all this argument is about right now. The argument now with the CRT and all of it, that's nonsense. And they're nonsense to even discuss this. I don't say to them, because honestly, Brother Kwesi, I don't want to teach them. I'm not interested in teaching their children. I'm interested in teaching mine. I want to teach us.
Oh, yes.
So my thing is, you don't ever have to worry about me wanting to come into your school and teach you about how horrible you've treated black people. I'm not interested in that. I don't have time for you. I want to teach us. CRT is ridiculous. It has nothing to do with educating children. It's a course in law school, a graduate course in law school. What they're worried about is me, because I'm the one that developed a curricula that goes into the classroom to teach children about the history and the culture of what happened in America. And the fact of what I just heard is that I have observed that. Remember the story that I told you earlier about when I taught in Gary, Indiana, and the children would literally turn their tables around to listen to me teach them about Africa? That's the same thing you just read to me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's the same exact thing. I witnessed that. And places I've gone, people tell me I can't get enough of this. I want to know more. Once you open up that Stargate, you gone. And that's it. You're going to ascend to higher levels. And what they're seeing now is that with us getting what we are demanding, they see we're going to leave them in the dust. Everything we do, Brother Kwesi, we turn to gold. They gave us the worst of the foods, the leftovers, the bitterest part of the greens, the internals of the pig, and we made it gourmet. It's to the point now where I call it the Simone Biles effect. They now have the nerve to tell Simone Biles, you can't perform that task in gymnastics. She said, well, why not? And they say, because we can't. And if you perform it and succeed, you're going to set a bar that we will never be able to meet again. We did the same thing, be that as it may, however you may feel towards brother Tiger Woods. He changed golf. No matter how you feel about him personally. See, I don't get in business. As it relates to golf, he opened that up to so many more people, particularly young African-American people. When you look at the Williams sisters in tennis, Naomi, Osaka, okay? And this next young sister playing tennis. You can sense that the fear is so intense amongst those who would wish to oppress us that they put heat up on Naomi Osaka, where she just had to back off and say, you know something, I think I'm going to skip a couple games here because y'all are getting on my nerves. I'm a tennis player. I don't do interviews. Okay? And the same thing with Simone Biles. They put so much heat on that sister that she said, I think I'm going to step back for a while because you're not about the game anymore. You're about trying to be superior over me, trying to tell me what to do. I need to back up off of this. But didn't she come back and win again? Because that's how we got it, Brother Kwesi. And they know it. Yes. Now, Michael Jordan changed basketball. Okay? We changed baseball. Anything we get into, we change. And what I'm telling the community is that when we get into education and we apply the same black magic in education that we apply in sports and entertainment, we're going to take off and they'll never be able to catch us again. That's just the simple fact. That's what that passage that you just read tells me. Give me an inch and I'll take a mile. Just open up that door. Let me get my foot in. I got the house now. We don't know that. We don't realize that, Brother Kwesi. We really don't realize how great we are, because if we realize how great we were scientifically and spiritually, it's over.
Yes, yes. And we are definitely going to get into your books as well, speaking on spirituality, speaking on the cosmos, and speaking on DNA and melanin. But before we go there, let's speak on your gender, right? Of course, brother Dr. John Henry Clark, your teacher. He once said that we are a nation within a nation, searching for our nationality. He goes on to say that black tells you how you look, but not who you are. Now, do you agree with that statement? And if so, how can we help to transition others to begin to use other words that will help aid in our freedom and liberation?
You know, Professor Clark was a phenomenal thinker. He was a master teacher. There was a time that I went with him to a presentation he was doing. And when we were returning, he said to me, "Booker T, I noticed you didn't hear a word I said." And I said, "You're right. I wasn't listening to what you said. I've heard this presentation. You added some things that I didn't, but this time I didn't want to listen to what you said. I wanted to watch how you said it." Because a teacher is not only someone that imparts knowledge for information's sake. A teacher is someone who imparts information for transformation's sake. So that what you learn transforms you. It makes you a different person. It's not just information that you have, okay, now I know it, that's it. It's about information that you can do something with.
Apply it.
And Dr. Clark was a transformational teacher. When you sat with him, you could do something. You didn't just go quote what he said wherever you went. You literally showed that you could assume the wisdom that he taught you. And he was transformational. He transformed me as a student. He helped me realize that I could go beyond just the information, use it, and transform my life. We have to define for ourselves what it is that we have to do. And we have to wish to be validated by those who wish us the best. It is hard for me to explain how insignificant anyone outside of my culture's opinion of me is. As far as I'm concerned. And I'm not saying that they don't have something to say and it could be intelligent. What I'm saying is that I validate those who I respect and honor. I research everybody, don't throw nobody's information away. But we have to be validated by our own. I validated